The Daily Bandit. Time to spread the news on an old Disney movie all over again. The 1992 feature film Newsies is now back on the spotlight with a brand new online video review. According to the website YouTube, very few have actually done the task of analyzing this feature, as most people would instead discuss about the Broadway musical. The most prominent of these YouTubers who did look upon the picture was Doug Walker back in January of 2014 for his Disney Semba series. But now there will be a new chapter to this story, as animation critic AniMat's is now tasked to give an opinion piece of this feature to the modern age. However, his opinions are no stranger to old man controversy, and this could be one where he might have to be careful, as it is considered a cult classic. Analysis at the Bandit state that it would most likely happen anyways because the internet seems to be a place where someone having a different opinion than you is treated as a crime. Will he be giving this a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Will the movie add a new fan to its collection? Will we even see one of AniMat's famous seals? We will give updated reports when we will receive new information on this special review by AniMat.
Oh, wow. Guess when you pick the right picture, your review ends up becoming newsworthy.
Over the years, Newsies would go on to become one of Disney's more fascinating movies in terms of its history. When the picture first came out back in 1992, it was a full-on loser. Critics thought it was garbage and it was a box office bomb. But as the years go by, its reputation would take an unexpected turn. More and more, people would discover this little movie, and like the newspaper said, it gathered a bigger and bigger cult status, more than most other Disney films that started as a flop. But its glory wouldn't fully bloom until 2011 when a stage musical premiered at the Paper Mill Playhouse back in Jersey. Then a year later, it would move to Broadway for 2 years with over 1,000 performances and the long-awaited praise from critics that it was hoping for 20 years prior, on top of getting 2 beautiful Tony Awards.
The funny thing about it is that part of its history would be accredited to the fact that this was actually directed by renowned choreographer Kenny Ortega, which this was actually his first directing gig, by the way. Now, yeah, sure, this would be the guy that would later be infamously known to direct the High School Musical and the Descendants films, but he also had a bit of a knack of directing movies that would much later on become fan favorites. And if you don't believe me, look at his second picture, Hocus Pocus. When that film came out, it became a total schmuck. And now, it is one of Disney's most beloved Halloween classics next to The Nightmare Before Christmas. So, with that said, I'm sure that the Newsies would end up being the same thing, where today it would be much more beloved and it would be much more appreciated than it was back in the 90s, right? Well, that depends on how you look at it, honestly.
You see, the whole point of Newsies is that it was actually based on the real-life events of the 1899 Newsboys strike. Although rather loosely, because if there's one thing Disney doesn't know what to do, it's to accurately tell real-life history. Like you ask them to tell the story of Pocahontas, they'll tell you that there's a raccoon and a pug chasing each other like Tom and Jerry. So with that said, this is a movie that depicts 1899 New York as more glamorous. In fact, some could argue that it does so to a fault. No bozo's gonna come in thinking that this was New York back then. Not when kids are constantly dancing in the streets, everything seems fine and dandy around the city, and almost everyone would have an accent so thick that Joey Wheeler from Yu-Gi-Oh! Sounds realistic in comparison.
Trust me, if me talking like this throughout the review annoys you, then imagine sitting through 2 hours worth of this.
What is that unpleasant aroma? I fear the sewer may have backed up during the night.
Yeah, well, mine told me not to starve, so we both got an education.
I gotta find me a new selling spot where they ain't used to seeing me. So, Jackie boy, I've been hearing things from little boys.
Brooklyn Rage! Because of all this, there is a bit of a corny air to the feature, where what you have been given is more romanticized and exaggerated for the purpose of fitting it into the musical genre. Even the acting can get over the top at times. even with your boy Christian Bale taking the lead as Jack Kelly, and that it's clear that it would value quantity over quality with its characters. So what we end up with is like this cartoony battle of the rough wise guys versus the pompously rich bureaucrats. However, that doesn't hinder that there is a little charm to each of them, so at least they ain't hateable for the wrong reasons. But probably the strongest component that came out of this movie is the musical numbers, brought to us by J.A.C. Redford and the one and only Alan Menken. And keep in mind, this is Menken at his most legendary moment, since he was writing these songs at the same time when he was working on The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast. Each of these songs would steal the show and present this larger-than-life feeling that can only be added by the choreography. In a way, you could tell that Menken lent a hand to this, considering that there can be some similarities to the songs from the Disney Renaissance films. But I can guarantee that anyone watching this will come out with at least one song stuck in their heads with its high energy, catchy beat, and strong lyrics. Whether it be stuff like Santa Fe, Seize the Day, or even King of New York.
If the life don't seem to suit ya, how about a change of scene? Far from the lousy headlines and the deadlines in between. Time to seize the day.
Now is the time to seize the day.
Send out the call and join the fray.
Send out the call and join the fray.
Bronx will be
Now, I'm the king of New York.
Ain't you heard? I'm the king of New York.
Holy cow, it's a miracle. Pulitzer's crying, Weasel, he's dying.
But if I do have to get into a major problem here, it would have to be the story. In hindsight, it is a generic plot of this ragtag team trying to stick it to the man, complete with its cliches and predictability, where we know where the ups and downs will go. That wouldn't necessarily be a huge issue, but on top of the highly cheesy tone as a musical, its length is what turns it into something serious that can't be ignored. Like I said before, this movie is actually 2 hours long. These types of movies would usually go for just like 90 or even 100 minutes. As a result, not only are the scenes predictable, but they also get worse when they just drag on. Just shorten some parts so we could shave off like 20 minutes and it could have saved itself from some trouble.
Okay, so far with my little list of criticisms, things aren't necessarily looking good for the movie. You got a cheesy tone, you got over-the-top acting, and a pretty bad story that's going on for a little too long. I think it seems like it would be the indications that this ain't gonna be a good picture, right? Like, no wonder the critics slammed it hard back then. But wait just a cotton-pecking minute. Now, there was actually one thing that I noticed throughout the whole picture that honestly just changed everything for me. It changed the way that I saw the movie, and it really explained everything about why the movie was even like this in the first place, and why did it even have all these flaws. Now, I don't know if you have noticed while watching those little clips and stuff like that, but you see that they ain't in Hollywood at all. They're in New York. And those boys there, they ain't meant for the pictures, they are meant for the stage.
With that in mind, it all makes sense what the movie wants to do. Sure, the cheesiness, the exaggerated acting, the songs getting more focused than the plot, and the elaborate choreography may feel out of place in an environment of a movie that's supposed to be based on true events. But they would all feel right at home when placed in a stage musical. The criticisms I've given so far are just criticisms as a movie. I wouldn't do the same if this were a theatrical production. On the stage, those problems can actually help the show be fun and engaging for audiences to be sucked into the world it's set in. In fact, if you look at how the sets are built, while bigger than a regular stage, they are crafted to have these open spaces and have the backgrounds just sit in the back for the performers to be the center of focus to give you the real show instead of having those establishing shots of New York in the old days. In a way, some could say that the film's biggest issue is just that it's told in the wrong medium. It has all the requirements to put on a great show that audiences will love, but it picked the wrong equipment to tell its story. It's a lot like the 2005 movie of The Producers. It's a phenomenal show, but it's obvious that it was tailored for Broadway more than on the movie screens. However, similar to the 2005 Producers, while it didn't please the critics, it still gathered a huge fan base because it still feels like watching a stage musical. Not everybody can get a chance to see the Broadway show, so this is the closest thing they can get.
In a way, how the Newsies managed to get its cult status is by how people view the movie. When they would put it on, they don't expect to see like a legitimate feature film. They would go in expecting a show, like if it was a play, like real actors and real people are right in front of their faces doing all the stuff like dancing and singing and all that kind of crazy stuff while telling the story about the newsboys strike of 1899. However, there is one more thing that I want to give this movie credit other than the songs that I really do appreciate and is probably one of the strongest points. And funny enough, it's actually regarding its message, since it actually is now more important than it was back when it was released back in 1992. And that is the power of the press.
Now, this message wouldn't show up until about the second half, and it would then be more prominent as it would progress. What the movie wants to tell is not just the events of the newsboys strike, but also to have a commentary about how a voice can be a very powerful thing. And at the time, the strongest way of spreading a voice is through the newspapers. These newsies want their voice to be heard far and wide about how they're treated like rats. But they were up against one of the biggest newspaper companies in the world, and they controlled the biggest voice out there.
Power of the press is the greatest power of them all. I tell the city how to think. I tell the city how to vote. I shape its future.
That's where the movie shows the dark side of the press. In the wrong hands, they can manipulate how people can think and control what truths can be said or hidden. That's what makes the press so important. It's to give those with a voice a platform that's far bigger than just by saying it out loud. This is more relevant than ever because there are people with power out there that want to destroy that voice and want to control how people think by fear-mongering, promoting violence to those that think differently than them, and labeling the press as the enemy of the people. Those are the ones whose arch-nemesis is the truth. And if someone with a voice comes out with that truth, then their reign of power would be over. And for that, I do have a bit of admiration for what the movie tries to do. Overall, Newsies may not function as well as a movie, but it is still a strong musical with a lot of heart and a lot to admire. As a feature film for the screen, it's a little too cheesy for its own good and the story is weak, especially for a 2-hour picture. But on its own, it is highly enjoyable with likable characters, great choreography, a powerful message, and songs that are top-notch. Now, for my recommendation, I would say that this is not for the movie buffs. Instead, this is for the theater kids, the musical lovers, the Broadway fans. If it builds itself more as a stage show, then give it to the people that love that kind of stuff. So, now that I said all that, I still gotta give my rating. Well, considering all the factors that this movie offers, I'm gonna go with a 7 out of 10. It ain't perfect, especially as a movie, but if you can't watch the Broadway show now, then this is a suitable replacement in the meantime.
Now I know that many of you guys don't necessarily read the papers anymore, and you would rely on new technology in order to get your news, rather it be through your smart aleck phones or one of them fancy computers, you know, like this bad boy right over here. But regardless of where you get your source, regardless of where you would read the news, when you do read it, you always gotta remember that there is someone behind it whose job is it to tell you about what is happening in the world so that you don't come out clueless. And they need your support more than ever. Don't let any orange stronzo or crazy tyrants tell you otherwise with that enemy of the people garbage. You know what I mean? Now, if you go and excuse me, I'm gonna go and read the paper right over here since this is still my news source. so I need to know a little bit more about what they say about my review. That and also, I gotta keep this shtick going until the credits roll. See you all later.
Breaking news! Animation critic AniMat has officially released his online video review of Disney's 1992 film Newsies. He gave it a score of 7 out of 10, stating that it may not function as well as a movie, but it is still a strong musical with a lot of heart and a lot to admire. He also put in a unique twist to the review by dressing up as a turn-of-the-century paperboy and spoke with a Brooklyn accent the entire time. The review is available to watch on his YouTube channel and his Patreon page.
Okay, whew. Alright, well, at least I got that done. Seriously, I gotta get this accent out of the way or else people might mistake this for a Cartoon Palooza review.